Welcome to day 17 of the 21 Days of Prayer podcast with REVO Church. We've had a great couple weeks so far. We're on the home stretch here in 2025, kicking off the year right with prayer. This morning, I have the expert on day 17 with me. I'm happy to have her here. So go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm Amy. I am the Our World director here at REVO, and I have 4 kids, and I have a wonderful husband named Josh, who is the
wonderful
ministry
kids
pastor.
as well. Yep.
Yes, wonderful kids as well, most of the time.
Yeah, almost. And Josh is wonderful most of the time
most
as
of the
well.
time,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, we're all human. We get it. Thanks for being here today, Amy. You wrote on Hebrews 12 and Genesis 39. That's a long passage, like 23, 24 verses from Genesis 39. The topic was fleeing sin, which when you think about fleeing sin, oftentimes I think about at least things that I need to do or shouldn't do, and things I need to run away from. How'd you connect those verses and that topic to the spiritual discipline of prayer?
So I think about Joseph and the fact that those verses were about the fact that he had to keep his eyes on Jesus. And the only way you can keep your eyes on Jesus and know what to do is to pray. And it's the relationship with Jesus. As soon as you stop praying, you're stopping that connection with Jesus. And so when I think about how we should use Joseph as an example, I think of how reading between the lines of how much time he was actively spending time talking to God.
Right. He had this great connection and relationship with God that enabled him to then know, okay, what's going on right here is not a good thing. I need to run away from this. And then at other points in his life, he had that great connection that enabled him to do certain things or to not do certain things. I would say he's a great character to name a kid after, wouldn't you, Amy?
I do.
Oh yeah, one of her son's name is,
I have Joseph. I have a Joseph. So
yeah, it works well. So as we're thinking about the theme of walk worthy, it'd be easy to see fleeing sin and walk worthy as a connecting point. How are you thinking through that as you're talking about fleeing sin?
Well, I go back to what we always tell our kids, and that is to listen and obey right away. And that goes hand in hand with prayer. So as we're trying to develop, and when I think through that is like we're trying to develop kids that want to follow Jesus through everything, and you have to first learn to be able to listen. And so in Hebrews, it talks about the fact that we have a race to run and that we want to be able to get to the end of the race. And so we want to be able to run our race well and end well. And so the only way that we can run our race well is by keeping our eyes on Jesus and fleeing everything that comes about. So that's creating boundaries, that's creating guardrails, that's creating various different ways so that we can make sure that we can stay on the right path and do what actually God asks us to do.
Right.
Because if we go off our path, we can never actually do what he tells us to do.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing a story about a lady that, I think it was a lady that won the Boston Marathon maybe, or the New York City Marathon. And she had this great time. And then it starts to come to light, wait a minute, nobody remembers seeing her during the race. And come to find out, she had run the first part of the race and then somehow cheated and gotten to the finish line and waited around there till a certain amount of time had passed that would have been believable, not like ran a marathon in 10 minutes or something, and then jumped out and where nobody could see and ran across and eventually it got found out. That idea that's why races have rails, is because you've got to know where to run on the right path, or else you get to the end of the finish line and it's not going to count for anything if you've gone all over where the course is not, and you've run outside of the boundaries. And so that idea of having guardrails is a good one. I know that when I was running for a 5K that I only did twice, because unlike your husband, Josh, I do not like to run.
Me neither.
Yeah, but that's okay. Some people do. And I caught myself looking at my feet because I was hating myself and hating everything that was going on, and I didn't like running at all. And so I was just running and looking at my feet the whole time as I was sliding over the asphalt because my feet could barely pick themselves up, and I'm only on like mile 2. And then I read and heard that actually you've got to keep your eyes forward.
Right.
don't not straight down. Now, maybe not always directly forward. It can be at the ground, but as long as they're out in front, because the more down, it gets depressing. You're like, I'm not going anywhere, not doing anything, and you'll miss things that you might need to watch out for ahead. And so I like that idea of fixing your eyes on Jesus, looking forward, staying straight, making sure that when you're running your race, you're not getting sidelined.
And I would ask y'all to think through who is the person in your life that you can help create those guardrails, because all of us can try to do our walk with Jesus by ourselves, but we need others to come alongside us. So, the best way to be able to successfully run our race and do what God wants us is to have those people in our life that can hold us accountable to make sure that we are staying on the path that God has for us.
Yeah. That's a great it's a great segue into the last question I've been asking all of our guests for the past 16 days. So I want to continue the trend on day 17 as the expert on Hebrews 12 and Genesis 39. What's a next step that you can challenge the listeners of this podcast, the readers of day 17 that you wrote, a practical application point? One thing that I love about Amy and love about our world and as a whole is how they make it so easy for the kids to understand the Bible and so easy to understand who Jesus is, what he's done for them, and how they should respond. And so I know if there's anybody that's going to give us a great, practical, easy to understand next step based off of this, it'll be Amy. So what are you thinking of when you hear
so
that?
I mean, the same thing that we have in our world, we have small groups. And in small groups, it's where they get down and they talk about things on their level and practical. You'd be surprised what the conversations that actually come from those are, because just because they're little doesn't mean that they can't go deep. And so for adults, I would say the same thing. Our groups, and then be part of a community. Be part of the R group, but be part of an R group and be vulnerable. Because you can be in a group and sit there week in and week out and never share. And so those people are never going to be able to help you along your journey to get further in your relationship with Jesus. And so be vulnerable, and then even find one or two people in that group to then be even closer with, so that you talk to and pray through things outside of our group.
Yeah. And I know that on your serve teams at our world at South Fork, you guys have volunteers that are really close, right?
Yes.
Where it's not just their R group, but it's even where they're serving, so that the people that they're volunteering with in our world week in and week out become kind of their best friends, become that community. So I know that our group signups have technically passed, in mid-January, and some groups may still be open, but there's other ways to do that, right? Jumping into a volunteer team, serve team.
I mean, my volunteers will say that if you don't want to get close to God and not grow, then don't come down here and serve with Jesus, and serve these kids to teach them about Jesus. Because, I mean, the men they send devotions to each other daily, and they keep each other accountable. And the women check on each other and pray for each other. And it becomes a group they just want to be there for each other.
Right.
And so they're their accountability and want to be there.
Yeah. Love
to
that.
Grow each other up.
Thanks for that next step. You guys heard it. Find a way to get in community with somebody. And maybe you're already in that community, like volunteering or serving in our world, or in the student ministry, or on the worship or production team at REVO. And so you've already got some friends and some people that you know at your church. Well, take that next step to reach out to them and grow deeper with them today and this week, both in your relationship with them and in your relationship with Jesus. Thanks for being here, Amy. Glad to have you on. Hope this podcast was a blessing to you, and that you've enjoyed day 17 that we wrote here for the beginning of 2025, and that God's going to use this to spark a revolution of life change in your heart and in your life through Jesus. We'll see you guys tomorrow.